everyone. Hello. Welcome back. It's the beginning of August, so it's time for another book club. And this month we read The Digital Delusion: How Classroom Technology Harms Our Kids' Learning and How to Help Them Thrive Again by Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I just noticed at the top of this book, it has a review from Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant! So you should read it because Hugh Grant said so. Yes, so today we're going to talk about that. How does this book compare to other books that we have read in the past? So this picture here, this lovely gentleman, that's Jared, Dr. Horvath. He has an impressive set of credentials. He's a neuroscientist. Talks about the brain and how the brain learns things and the evidence that we have about that topic in the book. It is fact heavy, but it's not exactly like school choice myths where it's designed to be like a collection of facts you have in your back pocket. It's still very readable. There's still a lot of his personality in the book. If you want to read more stuff that he's written, he has a Substack. I linked that in the description. This book is unique from other books we've read from book club because this book is the most recent book we've read. This book was published in like 2025. This book was recommended to me. I went to a homeschooling conference earlier in the year, and a speaker talked about this book and recommended it. When I was looking into this book, I found a review of it from one of my favorite librarian blogs, which I thought was funny, and I'll put that review in the description too. All right, so let's jump into exploring more of the actual content of the book. What are you most likely to remember a year from now? They changed the SAT. Oh, yes. I'll read you the section where he talks about changing the SAT. Now, I am not going to cite page numbers because I have an ebook copy of this book. But it's from chapter 2, Proof of Failure, which is just exploring the data about how ed tech is not helping students. And we'll read several passages from this chapter as we go on. Consider the SAT. In 2024, this U.S. high school exit exam transitioned from paper to digital. Along with this switch came a major overhaul of the reading comprehension section. In previous versions, students read 5 complex passages of 750 words each and answered 10 questions per passage. In the new online version, they are tasked with reading 54 short passages of just 75 words each and answer a simple question about each one. Rather than assessing the skill of deep reading, it's been traditionally understood, the test developers simply redefine the skill itself to better suit the digital medium. They changed the SAT. Horrible. Why? Just why on earth wouldn't they just keep the SAT normal? He talks a lot about this idea called the mode effect, which means that this studied phenomenon where people do worse on tasks they have to do online versus like IRL with pen and paper. And the people who designed the SAT know this. They decided to make the SAT digital anyway, and then to make up for the mode effect, they just changed the test. Horrible. Right, so let's move on. We'll jump a lot more in depth into chapter 2 and what the data is showing about what ed tech is doing to students and their performance. But before we do that, we'll answer this question. Did anything the author wrote remind you of anything you've experienced personally? So my personal experience with ed tech when I was in school is that we did not have these one-to-one devices where the school gives you a laptop and you were expected to use your laptop in class and have it open in front of you all the time, whether it be doing assignments with your laptop or taking notes. My first thought, like before I had read this book, one of my first thoughts about that would be, imagine that you were a teacher and you're lecturing and everyone your students all in front of you have pads of paper, you can see very easily if they're actually taking notes or if they're doing something else like doodling from your position in the front of the class. And you can kind of quickly nip that behavior in the butt, like, Johnny, stop doodling, pay attention to me, I'm lecturing, you need to know this information, right? But if everyone's on their laptops, they kind of have a partition, that prevents the teacher from being able to see if you're actually taking notes or if you're doing something else. And it's not realistic for the teacher to walk around the room, like snake through the rows, every 5 minutes or whatever, or walk around the room while they're lecturing. That's extremely distracting and like I said, not realistic. And even if the teacher were to kind of every so often walk around and look at everybody's screens, it's very easy just with a keyboard shortcut or a click of your mouse to just click back onto a notepad and make it look like you're taking notes, So that was my initial thought of like why that kind of thing might not be a good idea. And then just sort of in general, they're a distraction. You can be doing all sorts of stuff on your laptop. They block a lot of websites. Schools have software that blocks a lot of websites, but there's a lot they don't block because they're considered educational. I feel very strongly I would have not been able to handle a laptop in school. So let's jump right into quotes. And as I teased before, first chapter we're going to study, chapter 2, proof of failure. So as you see here, this is some test data. You can see these are tests that students take internationally, or students take all over the world. And you can see that there is a negative correlation in test scores of computer usage. In school, computer usage correlates to a drop in test score. And some of the things that he explores in the book as to why that might be were very interesting to me, and we'll read a few things from chapter 2 that I found the most compelling. Something that's very helpful about this book as well is at the end of the chapter they have a little section called At a Glance, where they present all of this information to you, and they have a little summary that's like at a glance, and here are the arguments sort of just broken down quickly. He has a section where he talks about why screens are poor for reading, and this was hard for me to read personally because I love ebooks, especially as someone who has 2 little kids. My son loves books and he loves to participate in reading, but that normally means he wants to take the book from me. So it's better for me to read on my phone, especially because it's a way for me to read with just one hand while I'm breastfeeding. But there are things to consider, right? And let me read this quote to you. Why are screens so poor for reading? Have you ever tried to return to something you'd read previously in a digital document only to discover you can't find it? You know it was there a few scrolls ago, but now it's gone. That's because your brain is searching for a place. But on screens, place doesn't exist. Screens strip text of any static location. Unfortunately, location is a key anchor of human memory. Much like a GPS, the hippocampus, our brain's memory center, builds a continuous mental map of the world around us. And each time we learn something new, that memory becomes tied to a specific 3-dimensional location within the map. And then there's also some interesting sections in chapter 2 about handwriting. Let's see. Let's read this section about a distinction between typing and writing, note-taking. Typing is fast. Many students, my niece among them, can type as quickly as a teacher speaks, making shallow transcription seem like a logical choice. In fact, studies consistently show that typed notes include more verbatim text and fewer transformed ideas, a hallmark of superficial engagement. Handwriting, on the other hand, is slow. No one can write as quickly as a teacher speaks, so pen and paper note takers are forced to focus on meaning. They must decide what truly matters as they summarize, reorganize, and even reframe material mid-sentence. Classic signs of deep cognitive engagement. There are 3 critical reasons why handwriting remains essential, especially in the early years. Handwriting builds fine motor skills. Handwriting benefits from variation that typing lacks. And handwriting activates thinking in ways that typing can't. So I think that chapter 2 was the most compelling chapter in the book. But we will talk about the other 2 chapters that I want to focus on, which are chapter 4 and chapter 8. Chapter 4 is talking to people, to tech apologists, people who are like, but technology and ed tech is so important. What you might say to them if you were talking to them about these issues out in the real world. And chapter 8 is about how we as parents can advocate for our children in regards to issues in ed tech. So, chapter 4. Let's see what we got. So, a common argument that you might hear is that we need time to see if ed tech will become beneficial. That it's like too early. We don't know if it will become beneficial later on. And he says the first major meta-analysis of computers in education was published in 1977. So, 1977 was 49 years ago. It reviewed over 150 studies, some dating back to 1962. The result, an effect size of 0.29. You're looking for an effect size of 0.4 to see that it's effective. He goes over that in chapter 2. And today, after 6 decades of research, investment, and iteration, what's the modern effect size of computers in education? It's still 0.29. As researcher Dylan William put it, technology is the revolution still coming after 50 years. How much time are we expected to give? Yeah. We would have seen the benefit by now. Yes, and then another common argument you hear is because these tools are so pervasive in workplaces, it's good to teach how to use them. And if we're thinking about something like typing up what the teacher is saying, like kind of stenography, transcription skills, frankly, a lot of that will be done by AI very soon. And we don't know what the world will look like in 15 years. It might look very different, right? So he says here, this is why K through 12 schooling has traditionally emphasized thinking through knowledge rather than training on tools. Students don't study history to become historians or write essays to become novelists. These disciplines are vehicles for building literacy, reasoning, mental flexibility, and those cognitive habits that will support long-term agility. International assessments now find that today's teenagers raised on devices and surrounded by screens throughout the school day perform worse on basic digital problem-solving tasks than students did a decade ago. Furthermore, employers increasingly report that young people are arriving less job-ready than previous generations. Teach the children how to learn things, and then they can apply those skills to learn any tool instead of just teaching them to use a tool that will likely be obsolete in 10, 15 years anyway. Finally, some things from chapter 8 is he gives a list of steps for parents. Step number 1, form a coalition. Well, you've got a pre-formed coalition right here. You got a pre-formed coalition. What's that say? That says Moms for Liberty. Yes, join us. Another important step that he gives is requesting opt-outs. I looked through our school board policies. We don't have opt-outs for one-to-one devices. That's something that they could implement. It was also looking more in depth into our school's response to ed tech. The school board has committees that help advise them about specific things, and one of the ones we have is a technology advisory committee. And each school board member appoints a person to be part of this. They focus on issues specifically related to ed tech, and they have meetings and they have public comment. So that would be a great way to advocate. Instead of speaking, you of course you can speak in front of the school board, but you can also speak in front of these smaller committees. And that's also, from experience, it's not as common to see people who come and speak at these little committees, even though they almost all of them have public comment. So it would be very easy to put a speech together. I could even go do that. Put a speech together and be like, have you read this book? Maybe you should look into it. There's all sorts of great ways to advocate for your community. So that's the end of this book club episode. Let's talk about upcoming books. It's finally August. The school board elections are on the 18th of August. Early voting starts on the 8th. And I think at the beginning, when I first started book club, I said that after the school board elections, we take a little break. I picked a graphic memoir, a comic book memoir for our August book. I love graphic novels, graphic memoirs, graphic nonfiction. I read a lot of them. Something that's nice about them is that they're quick and breezy. So August's book is called No Ivy League by Hazel Newlevant. At the time of recording this, I have already read this because you can breeze through them in a couple hours. And this is a memoir by a homeschooler, a homeschool student. And she makes some negative comments about the institution of homeschool influenced by this particular experience in her life. And I thought it would be a great way to talk about issues in homeschool, issues in parental rights around the story that she tells. And then I also wanted to go ahead and give you September's book in case you want to skip this one. But this book, To Whom Do Children Belong, whenever I Google books to try and figure out what I want to read for book club, this book always shows up. Google books about parental rights. Oh, you mean this? This is the book about parental rights. It's a philosophical book about legal philosophy around children, their autonomy, do they belong to the parent or the state, that kind of thing. I'm very excited to read it. So if you want to, and I'm going to be able to spend more time with this book, right? I can spend all of this month and all of September with this book. So that's all for book club. Thank you. Until early September, end of August. Goodbye.